Well, my name is Mohammed. I'm from Gaza. I'm sorry, I can't just sit here and not just criticize what I've seen in the video before I do anything. Because I was saying that there after the video was over, everyone here was clapping because they're Norwegians. But I'm a Palestinian who's living in Palestine, and I was not happy about what I saw. Yeah, the film was like really awesome. It shows how the brainwashed that the Israelis are. But there are some points that were really hurting from when she was saying, like she turned back her face from the camera and she was like saying, I have lots of memories here. I love this place. And then when the driver of the car asked her, are you an Israeli? And she said, yes, I'm an Israeli, very Israeli. When she says that this is my home, I love this place, this like really hurts because her home is built on Palestinian land. When she says that she has lots of good memories in that place, it really hurts because there are people in refugee camps who have bad memories because she's having good memories, and it's not fair for us. And I don't really get what is really good about living in a settlement with people who are Zionist settlers who are attacking Palestinians on a daily basis, killing them, confiscating their lands, and make their life miserable in everyday life. So I really don't get like most of the things she was talking about. And then when there was the interview with the guy from the Askar refugee camp, and she asked him, where are you originally from? He said, I'm from Jaffa. And then she told him, but you lived most of your life here, right? And this is your home now. And he said, no, I'm from Jaffa, and that's where my grandparents are from, and that's the truth. We Palestinians have lived in refugee camps our whole life. I have lived in a Jabalia refugee camp since I was born until I'm 28 right now. But yeah, during this time we've lived, like we had to suffer because there are some people coming from all over the world to the so-called state of Israel, and like they had advantages, they had really nice houses, they had really nice jobs, they had really nice life. While we're suffering, we had no electricity, we had no water, we had to, like when I wanted to study, I had to go work when I was at the age of 15 in order to get my financial money for my education, and that like was not really easy for me. I'm not gonna like say that there are no peaceful people in Israel, there are, but yeah, she gave an impression with her film for you guys that the human story of the Israelis, that there is the Zionists and there is the anti-Zionists, the people who are protesting against them. There are people coming in the parliament and saying, like contradicting the government and saying whatever they want, but that's not the actual thing of what Israel is. Most of the people of Israel are, like they don't want to see Palestinians, they don't want us to exist, they want to drive us to Jordan, they want to drive us to Egypt, they just don't see the name of Palestine exist anywhere. And that's, for me, like I don't accept anyone to give an idea for anyone who's listening to me that there could be peace with the Israelis. I'm not going to shake my hands with someone who killed my brother, killed my cousins, destroyed my house, stole my water, made my life miserable. So when she says I'm an Israeli, I do not accept you. As long as like you're feeling guilty because of what has happened during the Nakba, what your ancestors have done, then you should say it loudly. I reject being an Israeli. I reject being part of this conspiracy against civilians, against human beings who are living hell today just because I am living in that piece of land. Like today when we look at the refugees, Palestinian refugees in Yarmouk, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Jordan, in Libya, in Yemen, and everywhere of the world, they are like they're being killed, they're living in destroyed houses. Just because she says that I'm an Israeli, this concept is really hard for me to get, and I will not accept like being part of a game where someone whitewashes the crimes of a state that is somewhere in this world and saying that we're civilians, we're democratic, we're whatever. No, they're not like that. They're just a group of monsters living in a land stolen from other people. They're destroying their house, stealing their water, cutting their electricity. And I was during the war inside Gaza, and I cannot like explain to you in words what I've seen, what I've lived through. And I seem like a very hateful person for you guys, but I can justify myself. I have the right to hate Israel because I've lost 3 cousins during the last war. My house got hit. My neighbors, my friends. Like I've lost so many people that I know, who I love. And today someone just comes and says that I'm an Israeli. How do you want me to accept that? I do not. And thank you. Just wanted to give an impression about what I felt when watching the video. It was like really hurting for me sitting up there and just watching it. I just lived in the middle of the video and went out to smoke just because I can't understand it. And I don't want you to get the impression like there is lately this movement, pro-Palestine movement in the whole world where people just coming out and saying free Palestine. And I think this video is giving you the impression of instead of fighting for Palestine, fighting for peace. No, that's not the way it is. If you want to fight, then you have to fight for Palestine because this is justice before any kind of peace. We can live equally, and then we can speak about peace with Israelis. And thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Okay, I think we are going to have an interesting discussion here today. And I hope that also the audience will participate because you're also involved in it now. My name is Ronnie. I am a conscientious objector to military service, an activist in the Palestinian pro struggle, which is joined by a handful of Israelis and internationals, and most importantly, an activist in the BDS campaign, the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions campaign against Israel. But I'll just go directly to what Mohammed said. First of all, I think that Lia mentioned that she started her film actually by another, like the first version was called Seven Deadly Myths. And we have to acknowledge that the whole foundation of the State of Israel and everything that Israelis are trained to believe are lies upon lies upon lies upon lies. There's more than 7 deadly myths. There's at least 48 deadly myths, or 1,948 deadly myths. And I can count endless of them. And the whole identity of Israelis is a lie. And with that, I agree with Mohammed. Israelis cannot, the only way for them to feel comfortable about their Israeliness is if they disregard the fact that they live there on account of other people. Not because of 67, not because of the occupation that Mohammed is living, the hell, the barbaric, brutal occupation of Gaza, for example, but I'm talking about the occupation of 48, the way that Israel was founded on account of other people, what you saw in the film. But I don't think that Lia, and I will not speak on her behalf, but I don't, just saying this, I don't think that Lia doesn't acknowledge that. The whole film is about that. It's about acknowledging the lie that as if we can live a normal life in this state that is absolutely abnormal. There's nothing normal about Israel. There's also nothing legitimate about the state of Israel. Nothing. Israel, not only that there's nothing legitimate morally and so on, Israel violated its own UN-sanctioned mandate because in the UN partition plan, which was very unfair, where they allocated more than half of the land to about 30% of the population, which only had 10% of the land, which most of them were newcomers to the land, by the way, colonialists who came over to inherit the land. They were given more than half of the land. That was very unfair. But that plan was never implemented because the Zionists who founded the state of Israel, what was regarded a Jewish state, even though it has nothing to do with Judaism, it is absolutely opposed to Jewish values, and also anti-Jewish, by the way. The Zionists who founded that state, they insisted to have what they call a Jewish and democratic state. That is already one huge lie that we are being told. First of all, Israel is not Jewish and not democratic, it is anti-Jewish and anti-democratic. It was founded on everything that's opposed to democratic values and everything that's opposed to Jewish values. But also, that term, Jewish and democratic, is totally illogical. There's no way to describe it, because either you have a democracy or you don't have democracy. The only way to describe it is that, as Ahmed Tibi said, a Palestinian member of Knesset, he said that Israel is Jewish and democratic in the sense that it is democratic to the Jews and Jewish to the Arabs. Or in other way, it is Jewish and democratic in the ethnic supremacist character of the state. Everything about that state is about supremacy, about having exclusive rights, the land, exclusivity of the land, and exclusive rights, privileges to one select ethnic group that three of us here belong to, on account of the indigenous people, on account of everyone, especially the indigenous people like Mohammed. So yes, we came, not we, but whoever came there before us, came to inherit the land on account of the other people, by driving away the other people, by doing everything that was wrong, with the immense help of European powers. And that has to be acknowledged, and I totally agree with you about that. I don't think that the film tries to claim something else. I saw something else in the film that I didn't notice the first time I saw it, which is that I had a lot of empathy to those people who managed to overcome that. Like Amnon, like Tikva. Even though they did horrible things, it was from the human perspective. I had something, and I really, I mean, I have a lot of respect to Amnon. He's still, by the way, a political activist, and he's an activist with One State, we have a One State group in Jaffa, and he's active about that, about equality, multiculturalism, all of those things that, you know, we believe in. And those people, I think we have a lot to learn from, and I think that in that sense, I'm happy that to see that in the film. And I have other things that I can say about the film, but I think that that's what I would like to say for now.
I would just like to say to Mohammed that although I cannot speak for Lia for defining herself as an Israeli or not, although I cannot speak for Lia for the way she defines herself, everyone here defines themselves as anti-Zionist, and as far as I know, and no one is speaking about peace or normalization, because I don't think there's anyone in this panel or actually in this room who thinks for a minute that there are two sides in an argument and each side has to take a step and come to some sort of normalization. There is an occupying force and there is the occupier. And I don't think anywhere in the film there was a claim that there is something else. But does Lia want to say?
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because I mean, it's so hard, you know. We are, after all, fighting, and we are killing, and we are dying. And it's not a theory, and it's not over there. It's not an article in a newspaper. It's real people's lives. And I think that I agree with the last thing you said. Before there is equality, there has to be justice. We tried to get justice after the Holocaust. I don't think it really worked. But anyway, the world acknowledges now that what was done to the Jews was horrendous injustice. There's many conflicts that got some process of justice. And any way that we get to equality, we'll have to go through a process of justice, no matter how flawed it's going to be. But I would say that for me, defining myself as Israeli is the fact that I say that I belong to Israel-Palestine in no way says that Israel-Palestine belongs to me. I actually don't believe that humans have any ownership over land. If anything, we can worship it and be grateful that it gives us life. And I don't believe that nationality is enough to wrap yourself in, to define yourself. I feel that when I see one state, the one state I dream about, the one state we lived for centuries, is a one state of multicultural and where coexistence was the rule and conflict was an exception. I'm vehemently against ethnocracy in Israel-Palestine, and I thought that that's what I conveyed in my film. But I will say that this is not a film about Palestine, it's a film about Israeli denial. And when the film started, you saw a little clip from Stanley Cohen, to whom I dedicated my film. And Stanley Cohen is an incredible human being who I had the great privilege of meeting shortly before he died. Stanley was born in South Africa as a white Jewish affluent person. And at the age of 9, he realized that there's something fundamentally wrong with South African society. And he became an activist very early on, and in fact became active in the ANC and fought against apartheid, became a sociologist, and he founded the field of study known as collective denial, the study of collective denial. And he later lived in Israel for 12 years and finally in England. And Stanley defines that societies go through various stages when they tackle their own denial. My point was not to explain what happened to the Palestinians. My point is to explain why we are stuck in Israel. And when you understand these processes, you understand that the first thing that happens is the society says, nothing happened. In Israel, we can no longer say that. So then they say, okay, maybe something happened, but I didn't know anything about it. And of course, after the new historians, you cannot say that anymore. The next phase is something along the lines of, okay, something happened, and it is, maybe I knew something, but it's not as bad as it sounds. Okay, it is as bad as it sounds, but it's not me. And that's the stage we are in today. This collective agreement that it's not me. And it's not important. It's over there, it's in the territories, it's not part of my life. And before coming to Norway, I was showing the film in the German parts of Europe. And as someone who was always looking at Germany from the outside, I was under the impression that the Germans have gone through profound processes of tackling their own collective denial over their own responsibility for the Holocaust. And what I found when I came to Germany is that everyone I talked to, we would talk about the Holocaust, and they would say something like, it's terrible, what happened, and what our ancestors did. And I would say, oh, did you know any Nazis? And they say, no, nobody in my family was a Nazi. Oh, but my grandfather, he worked in Auschwitz. Or, no, I don't know any Nazis, but my uncle, he was in the SS. And so if you put together everyone who doesn't know any Nazis and their grandparents are not Nazis, then nobody did the Holocaust. And it's similar in Israel, where even today, thanks to the extreme fascistic parties that have created the Nakba law, and in fact made the Nakba a word in Hebrew, because all of a sudden everybody was talking about the Nakba law, they managed to sort of shake a lot of that denial. But the film that I made tried to show what happened to the rest of it. I guess that's all I have to say, and I want to say that, I hope that someday in one state we will again live as equals, and I will be free to define myself, and you'll be free to define yourself however you wish.
I will just start from where you ended. I wish you can define yourself as a Palestinian, and you're welcome to live in Palestine. You're welcome to share with us anything you want. We have no problem with the Jews. We have problem with the Israelis and the Zionists for occupying our land and taking everything. You said you don't understand the people who have this nationalistic background, but you, in your video, in your documentary, you described yourself as Israeli. And when the driver asked you how much of an Israeli are you, said very Israeli. That's so nationalistic of you. That's like, you're contradicting yourself here. Second of all, I don't really get it, why is always, when there is a Palestine event and there is an Israeli involved, they bring up the Holocaust. As if it's to make the audience guilty of what has happened to the Jews. I understand that what happened to the Jews is miserable, but that does not justify another Holocaust happening in Palestine. Even though you have connected them together, but still, I do not appreciate bringing the Holocaust to a Palestine story, because the reason Palestine is occupied is because of the Holocaust itself. It's because of what has happened to the Jews. The world felt guilty for the Jews, so they gave them a land that does not belong to them. And they caused millions of Palestinians to drive out of their countries and go to Egypt and go to Lebanon and go to Syria and elsewhere and live miserable lives. Until today, it's been 67 years, and this is really enough. We cannot just keep saying that peace, 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 peace for the Israelis. That does not work. We have to bring all the war criminals to justice. We have to tell them that what you've done is incredibly stupid and incredibly disgusting, and they have to admit that they've done the crimes. Otherwise, there would be never peace. And she's not like saying that there is something wrong with calling myself an Israeli. When I'm not proud of who I am, then I wouldn't call myself that name. The same as for Ronnie Barkan too. Like, he's talking about Palestine more than Palestinians themselves. Like, he's more committed to the cause than Palestinians themselves, but at the same time, he's not able to say that I'm not an Israeli. Yeah, you say I come from Palestine, Israel, I come from the occupied Palestine, but just using the name Israeli, it just contradicts everything else you do. It just really does. Because the existence of Israel is built on the misery of other people, millions of people everywhere. My family was living in occupation. Like, if you were in Gaza the last summer, you would understand what I'm talking about. Like, in Gaza, I did this rubble bucket challenge. If you heard about the rubble bucket challenge, where there was the ice bucket challenge for the cancer, and then there is a rubble bucket challenge for the people of Gaza. I did this rubble bucket challenge. Do you know what happened? I couldn't go have a shower after I had like lots of sand above my head. You know why? Because all the water is stolen by Israel. They take it, they put it in the borders, and then when they have the chance, they open the dams and they sink most of Gaza Strip. They just make floods. That's what they do. That's what, they don't like the existence of Palestinians. And when you say, I am an Israeli, then you're part of these people. Do you accept being part of monsters? That's my question.
Do you mind? I want to clarify that I brought the Holocaust up in order to talk about denials. But I think that if I'm actually hearing what you're saying behind what you're saying, and please forgive me if I'm not interpreting it correctly, I think what you're actually saying is that there's never going to be enough to make up for everything that Israel has destroyed and killed and taken. And I think you're right.
There is.
And I think that if I today stood up here and said, I'm not an Israeli, it will not be enough. It will not bring back the dead. It will not bring back the destroyed villages. It will not reverse history. The only thing I can do is to try, with whatever privilege I have, stop whatever I can. If you want to focus on how Lia Tarachansky identifies herself, fine. But I feel that what my job here on this stage to do is to say that I understand that no movie, no declarations, no leaving Israel, no nothing will ever be enough. And I know that. And I wish that I could bring back your cousins, but I can't. And I wish that the people that I love died could be brought back, but they can't. They're gone. And the only thing I can do is try and do something good with my life. And that's what I think other anti-Zionists in Israel are trying to do. And how we identify ourselves is something we can fight about. But in the end, there is a real enemy. And I am not your enemy.
Yourself is an enemy of yourself. You're an enemy of yourself. You just don't know what you are. You just don't know what you are. When you're saying that I'm an Israeli, but at the same time I'm anti-Zionist, that does not work. Israel means Zionism. Zionism means Nazism. Zionism means killing people and destroying them. The Israel is the existence of Israel. The word Israel itself is a problem. You just don't recognize that. You just don't want to say it. I don't have a problem with you as a human being, as a Jew, as a whatever you want. And you can't bring my cousins and loved ones. It's something that is already happening. And we know how to forgive as Palestinians. We know we have forgiven you for the Nakba, and we said we can have land on the 1967 borders, and we can live two states side by side, and we forgive you for the massacres you committed afterwards. But you keep reminding us. You keep reminding, like in 2008 there was an operation, they've killed 2,000 people. In 2012, another operation. In 2014, another operation. We're waiting for the next election for the other operation. Like every time there's an Israeli election, there's an operation in Gaza. There are thousands of people getting killed. Then why? Why do you say I'm an Israeli? Why do you like to tie yourself to this kind of concept? If you don't like it, just say, I am not an Israeli. I am a person who was born in Ukraine, Kiev, and I'm right now living in the USA or Canada. I have a job there, I have a house, I have friends, and I live there. Do not say I'm Israeli, because you do not belong to that place. That place is full of monsters who are living in other people's land and who are killing them and stealing their water, cutting their electricity, and destroying everything. And I'm speaking to you from the heart. I am not speaking to you because of, I don't hate you, I don't hate anyone. We've learned how to love in Palestine. We really did. During the war, I've seen this through my eyes. When I saw the people of Gaza, I was really proud of being a Palestinian because they did not say kill all the Israelis. They never came out on the street and said that we should kill all the Israelis. They said, please, enough war, enough killing, enough destruction. But when you see the other side, you see in Tel Aviv protests, people coming out in the streets and saying, more, we need more blood. Netanyahu comes out in the news and says we're going to exceed for, make the war longer in Gaza Strip and killing more children. Seriously, if you know the Palestinians, if you try to live between them, you will understand that these people are human. They have lives, they have needs, they hate Zionism, they hate Israel. But that does not mean we hate you as a person. We hate the fact that you are just putting yourself in that position. And we're ready to forgive you. We're ready to forgive every single Israeli and Zionist if they admit that what they've done against Palestinians is a crime and they reject being Israelis or related to this Zionist regime. If you're just brave enough to come up and say that I don't belong to this community of monsters, then I will respect you for that. I will receive you in my house and give you a room and we can live together, share everything. Thank you.
I think that, first of all, going to the issue of monsters living in Israel, it's not that far-fetched. 95% of Israelis, and when we say Israelis, we never count the 20% who are not privileged, who are not Jewish. We only count, it's an exclusive society. When we say Israelis, we only count 80% of the population. 95% of Israelis supported the massacre, the recent massacre of Gaza. The same number also supported the previous massacre in 2008, 2009. Only 3 or 4% actually even thought that Israel was using excessive force. So not only that they supported what was happening, they didn't even think that bombing 17 hospitals, demolishing 8 of them, bombing everything else in sight, flattening, razing to the ground entire neighborhoods, that was excessive force. So yes, I think that I would not think that treating these people as monsters is outrageous. I would say that, maybe I use different terminology, but I think that this is definitely monstrous activity. But even worse, as far as I'm concerned, is the fact that 95% of the water in Gaza is toxic. It's not fit for human consumption. This is done because of a political decision by the Israeli government, a monstrous decision by the Israeli government. That same government, or the defense ministry, also formulated formulas to count the caloric intake for the people of Gaza. And they even made changes to the formulas in order to accommodate for what they call societal differences, cultural differences. So in their formulas, they take into account that people in Gaza don't need so much fresh fruit and vegetable. They need more white flour and sugar and oil. Now they say that they never implemented it. Okay, let's assume that they never implemented these formulas. Writing these formulas, that's even more than monstrous. I would definitely call that a Nazi type of thinking. And my concern is not that those monsters in these air-conditioned offices wrote these formulas and decided on these policies, but that the vast majority, almost 100% of Israelis, it doesn't bother them one bit. That I can say for a fact. At the same time, I think that most of the people who live in Israel, or a large part of them, they're mostly ignorant, apathetic. They don't know and they don't want to know. I mean, they are actively not knowing what's going on around them. Because acknowledging that would totally take away everything from under their feet. I mean, their whole identity is one big lie, as I mentioned before, and no one wants to acknowledge that. So from the psychological perspective, I can understand how people convince themselves, or whatever, convince themselves that the Israeli Defense Forces has anything to do with defense. They convince themselves that they're surrounded by enemies. They convince themselves that there is such a thing as Israeli Independence Day, which is the exact same day as Nakba Day, even though the only misconception is that these are two different calendars. But there is no Israel alongside Palestine. Israel was built on top of Palestine and on account of Palestinians. That's how it was founded. That's the only way to acknowledge what happened, how Israel was founded. So their identity is to acknowledge that they live there on account of other people. And with that, I agree with Mohammed. At the same time, when I was watching the film, I mentioned that I felt a lot for people like Amnon and Tikva who were in the film. But the other person I was thinking about a lot was you. Because I knew, I could imagine what you're going through, and also this discussion that we're having now. Because yes, especially these remarks that you mentioned, I mean, when Lia identifies as Israeli and so on. So I would like to ask Lia, if that's okay, what do you mean when you identify as Israeli? And if you listen to me, and I know you did, then I never identify as Israeli. I only identify as Israeli in one context, and you know that. From the legal perspective, my status, my legal status in Israel-Palestine, usually I would refer to it as Palestine, my legal status there is a privileged Israeli Jew. That is because I carry an Israeli citizenship, but my nationality is not Israeli. There is no such thing as an Israeli nationality. My nationality, according to the State of Israel, is Jewish. My neighbor in Jaffa would have an Israeli citizenship, but their nationality would be Arab. I won't go into it too much, but this is all done in order to differentiate and to legally give privileges to people of my ethnic background and take away the basic rights of the others, even if they are citizens of that state. This is how it was founded. And when this was taken to the Supreme Court of Israel, which is the main vehicle of apartheid, not the army, it is the Supreme Court, which is, when Leibovich coined the term Judeo-Nazis, Leibovich was an amazing thinker and an Orthodox, a religious Jew and so on, he coined the term Judeo-Nazis. You know who he called Judeo-Nazi? The president of the Supreme Court of Israel at that time. That Supreme Court tries to legitimize all the illegitimate practices of the State of Israel. And that court, when they were supposed to decide about that thing, people went there and they said, we want to be identified as Israelis, we want to have an Israeli nationality, not a Jewish nationality. Then that Supreme Court said, we cannot do that, because acknowledging an Israeli nationality would undermine the very character of the State of Israel. That would mean that there will be some basis of equality, that we treat everyone as Israeli, and they don't want to do that. They acknowledge that that goes against everything that the State of Israel is about. So from the legal perspective, I'm a privileged Israeli Jew. Not because I feel Israeli or Jewish, I am a human being, and I don't need more than that. I couldn't care less about anything else.
I would like to say something before maybe you can answer the question. And this is, but that's totally personally, I would like to thank Mohammed. And the reason for this is that when I am personally being asked, where are you from? I always say I'm from Palestine. And when people ask me, are you Palestinian? Then I say, no, I'm an occupier. Today, when I stood on stage, I said that I'm a congested objector from Israel, or an Israeli congested objector, which is something I never say, but I said it today, I guess, because of making the space between me and Rabia, or, you know, defining us as the ambassador of one state, which are coming from two different sides, perhaps. And actually, your remark has put light on me personally that I would not do it again. But that's.
I'd be happy to answer your question. And since you asked, I think I will answer. But I have to say that I think that we spend all of our time talking about identity politics and none of our time talking about how to dismantle Zionism. And this is a huge strategic mistake. Why do I identify myself as Israeli? Because it reminds me every single day that I'm responsible for these crimes, whether or not I did them myself. The other reason I identify myself as Israeli is because I grew up in Israel, I speak Hebrew, I feel at home in Israel. It's the only place in the world I've ever felt at home. And when I'm fighting for justice and for equality, I'm fighting for justice and equality in a state in which I will be free to identify as whatever cultural group I am. And Israel has been in existence for 70 years, just as long as the Soviet Union. I was born in the Soviet Union. My identity is Soviet, and no one will ever tell me, because the Soviet Union fell apart, that part of your identity that is Soviet is no longer valid. Israel has been in existence for 70 years, and it has its own culture and its own way of being, and that is the place in which I grew up. It's just who I am. And when I say in a space like this, I am Israeli, what I'm saying is that I acknowledge that forever, as a result of where I come from, I am responsible. And I want people to know that I'm responsible. And whoever I meet everywhere in the world, the first thing I say is I'm from Israel, because I want to tell them, and I am against what is happening, and you should be too. That's all I'm going to say about my identity, and I really hope that some of you would like to participate in this conversation. If you want to talk about the One State, or about the film, or about any of the comments on the stage, I'd be really happy to hear them. Because we all came here to Norway. We traveled very long distances, and I feel very privileged to be on this stage with these wonderful and dedicated human beings. And I'm sure that they have a lot to contribute to your questions.
Mohammed, is it okay if we go to questions? There we go.
I have a question. We know a lot about the BDS and...
Is the mic on?
Okay. Oh yeah. We have had a lot about BDS and how to support it from here, from abroad. But it's the first time I am to such an event when talking about one state. Is there anything we can do about supporting this idea, or is it more an internal process in Israel and Palestine that has to go on, that is going on there in a minority basis? No.
The question is BDS internal?
No, BDS, we know a lot of BDS and in Palestinian community and so on. We're supporting this idea, but it's very little discussion here about the one-state solution or one-state idea. Is there anything we can support this idea from here, or is it more that it's more the process that's going on in Israel and Palestine, and that should be going on there and not with any interference from abroad and support from abroad?
Is it okay if I take a few more questions?
I think it's time to pull out that we are in Oslo.
Yeah, we are in Oslo. Can you move the mic?
I'm Kirsti Orsøy from the Norwegian
Kai.
Committee for Academic and Cultural Boycott of Israel. It's very hard to say, it's too long.
Could you talk into the microphone?
Yeah, okay. I was also thinking about what kind of solutions. When we speak with some Israelis and people who care for Israel in Norway, they say, but they just want peace, we want peace. So what kind of peace? And I'm a bit curious about what are you thinking of when we are talking about peace? Each of you, it's a question for all of you. There is, official Norway is supporting two-state solution, and I recently went to many universities in the West Bank, and people talked about boycott and one state, two-state solution. And we know that some young don't believe in this. So what are you thinking about this?
So I'll answer both questions at the same time. I'll try. First of all, I'm very happy that we're here in Oslo to discuss this. It's very important. I would like to think that this would be a milestone in overturning everything that was done since the Oslo Accords. All the horrible things that were done since the Oslo Accords due to it. What is different about the one-state discourse is that it doesn't fall into that type of thinking about demographics. How many of us versus how many of them. It doesn't take into account the us versus them. When we talk about one state, we demand equality in all of historic Palestine, just like it was before Zionism, by the way. Before Zionism, there was real coexistence there. Not only there, but also there, between Jews and Muslims and Arabs. And by the way, those who were living there were not quite a few of them did not become so Zionist later on because they had their tradition that was actually in real coexistence. I mean, they were living there, together. So when we talk about one state, we demand democracy rather than demography. We demand equality, multiculturalism, rights of minorities, everything that is the basis of democratic values, which, as I mentioned before, is everything that's opposed to what Israel is about. And it's everything that's opposed to what we are being offered, whether it be two states, or binationalist state, or all kinds of other kind of creative inventions that we hear. And all these other creative inventions, including obviously the one state, are basically geared towards giving something to the Palestinians, something that the Palestinians can live with, in order to maintain that ethnic supremacist state in its limited borders. And that is the only difference between the two types of Zionists that exist in the world, and there are only two types of Zionists that I know. There are the right-wing Zionists, which are racist and proud of it. They say, yes, there was the ethnic cleansing in 1948, but that's a good thing, because otherwise we wouldn't have our supremacist state that we like so much. Because this is ours and only ours. They are much more honest about their racism, and they are also, the acting government, you hear, what you see is what you get, basically. With the other type of Zionists, which are a far greater problem, which are the ones who created the Oslo Accords, the so-called liberal Zionists, there is no such thing as liberal Zionism. There is no such thing as moral Zionism. It's a contradiction in terms, a moral supremacist. The so-called liberal Zionists, they speak a whole different language. They speak the language of human rights and peace in order to sugarcoat, in order to cover up for their racism. And there's endless examples that I can give you, but basically what they want is they want to give something to the Palestinians, but in order to maintain, to protect that supremacist state, and they know that they cannot protect, they cannot legitimize what is happening in the occupied territories. That's why they want to give it away, because it's indefensible. But they have managed to convince the world that what is happening inside Israel proper, or what we call 48, is okay. But none of it is okay. It is just as racist, it's just as supremacist, and when we talk about apartheid, apartheid as defined in international law, as the crime of apartheid as defined in the Rome Statute, Israel inside its limited territories, inside Palestine 48, is an apartheid state, not only in the occupied territories. These liberal Zionists, they speak a different language. I'm sorry if this answer is too long. I'll try to make it short. These liberal Zionists, when, for example, I will quote from the Association for Civil Rights in Israel, which is at the forefront of protecting apartheid, but they are regarded as a very progressive liberal Zionist organization. When they wrote a report questioning whether Israel is a democracy, The whole report deals with the occupied territories. And obviously the conclusion was that there is no democracy in the occupied territories. That's easy. But there is also one interesting paragraph at the beginning on the first page, which says pretty much, I will try to quote it as closely as I can. They say that also inside Israel proper, there is an inherent form of discrimination, which is done both by law and in practice, which is based on ethnicity. And this type of discrimination makes Israel a unique case among Western countries. The next line is, but this is not for the scope of this paper. What was the paper about? Whether Israel is a democracy. This same organization has actually perfected this language of lies, this discourse of lies. It really brought it into an art form. So this art, this event around arts and so on, actually they should be here performing for us, Israel a democracy. They are speaking about apartheid, but only in the occupied territories, never inside Israel proper. They will speak about refugees coming from Eritrea and Sudan. They will not say a single word about refugees, Palestinian refugees. They speak about the strong basis of Israel democracy, fighting for democracy. Even though Israel is not democracy, it is vehemently opposed to democratic values. And they have actually managed to convince the world. So the One State discourse totally throws that into the garbage and starts over from where we left off before the Zionists came over and basically ruined the land and the place. And there is also activity here abroad, outside of Palestine. Last year there was a conference in Zurich about the One State solution or One State discourse. And I think that also this year there should be one. I think it is still in the making, so please stay tuned. But the discourse is very important, not necessarily whether we are actually going to have one state eventually, but the discourse actually doesn't give legitimacy to all the other things that I mentioned before.
Thank you. Mohammed, would you like to answer?
Yeah, I will answer the question of peace. Yeah, we Palestinians do want peace, but peace without justice does not work. You cannot accept from a woman to shake hands with her rapist. Palestine have been raped since 67 years and still being raped on a daily basis. Palestinians have been suffering, they've been living in refugee camps all over the world. They're living miserable situations in Gaza Strip and the West Bank. Their lands are being confiscated. Jerusalem is I'm not really sure. Muslims are not allowed to pray in Al-Aqsa Mosque. Like, there are lots of things that needs to change before we talk about peace solutions. And I do not believe that Israelis want peace, and that shows, like, that is really proven by the way they voted in the last election. When you see 70% of the Israelis voting for the world's criminal number one, war criminal number one, Netanyahu, and then the next one is Tzipi Livni, who was the hero of the 2008 genocide in Gaza Strip, then you know that the Israelis are not directed toward peace with the Palestinians. They do not believe on our existence. How do we talk about peace when you're having some people who want to get rid of you? Yeah, before talking about peace, the Zionists have to admit that they've committed crimes in Palestine, that they have destroyed houses, they have killed people, and they have to stand up like in front of court. Netanyahu should go to the ICC, the army leader should go to the ICC, and then we can talk about how the peace would look like with the Israelis. One state solution, two state solutions, as long as there is justice. I don't really care about names. Palestine, Israel, I don't like, as long as we look for the human side of the story, like as long as humans are equal, as long as the criminal have been judged and has been sued for the crimes they've committed, then it's okay. I don't care, like, Palestine is just a name created. Israel is a name created. But there are people who are affected by these names. And this needs to change before talking about any kind of peace with the Israelis.
I agree with everything Hamza.
Any more questions? The mic is here. Guys,
Thank you for a very interesting and very direct discussion. It's not very often that you experience that you expel your opinion so explicitly. Lia, thank you for the film. I saw a long interview with you a few days ago with a Canadian TV company I think you worked for. where the theme of the interview was identity. And the interviewer, a senior journalist that you worked with also in Palestine, he tried all the time to come back to you. He said, but Lia, this is about identity. And you said, well, okay, but you know, I want to talk about this and that. I said, okay, you're talking about geopolitics all the time, but I think what you do is that you're taking yourself as an example, and that's very important to understand, compassion, to have empathy. So I also have sympathy for Mohammed from Gaza that rejects the term Israelis. But I think what Lia has done with her film is that she has, her target group is Israelis, the ordinary Israeli, not the world opinion so much, I think. So I think this is a very important film. And I also thank you that you used Sukrut so much, the organization that is very brave, like we're all through the film actually, but because they don't have any money and they don't do any international information either because they don't have money. So this film can be shown in outside Israel also with a lot of good things, you know. So my question is also, where has this film been shown? Has it been shown on television in Europe? I think it should be shown on Norwegian television very soon. Also, thank you very much.
Are there any more questions in the hall before we go into answering?
My name is Oslo Eliassen. I was working in Gaza this autumn for United Nations, and within the Gaza Strip, it's very much destroyed, but you also have parts, especially in Gaza City, which is working pretty well. And you also,
So you also have what?
Can you speak a bit?
Yes. Yes, the daily life is running, especially in Gaza City. So, but well, you could state that all the economic life has been destroyed, and all the factories and so on, many schools. Although I was working within the education section, and almost 100% of the children were attending schools, although some schools were destroyed and a couple of them completely destroyed.
Almost 100% of children go to school.
96% were back, yes. So I just, first of all, I want to thank you for the film. I think it's very, very important what you have made, and you also you are coming the other side, you want to create peace. That is my interpretation. So I just wonder also, how is it possible to find a way towards peace? And also, how is it with the role of United Nations and also UNRWA? Is that something that would contribute to the peace? And also the problems now within Gaza, you have also within Palestine with Hamas and Fatah, and we still haven't a unified government, which also creates problems. So there are very many aspects. But nevertheless, your film will contribute to the peace, hopefully. So thank you very much.
I think we can answer that because Gaza is a topic for itself, so it's better to keep it separated.
Well, yes and no. I think that if you allow me to put on the hat of a journalist now, because of course I cover this for the Real News Network, I think that the best role the UN can play in this moment is the report that is going to come out in the next few days about the 2004 attack on Gaza. If it can be used by the PA to take Israeli leaders to the International Criminal Court and bring them to justice. At this point, I think that's the main role, because unfortunately the UN has played historically a role of subsidizing Israel's occupation and taking on itself the role of fulfilling for the Palestinians the role that Israel as an occupying power should be filling out. And I think this is why there's so little faith in the UN amongst most people in Israel-Palestine. I also want to add that I think it's important for us to remember that we on the stage are individuals. We don't represent anyone, we represent ourselves. I'm just an Israeli, just one person. I don't represent anyone. And as far as where the film has been screened, it premiered in Tel Aviv at the Cinematheque Tel Aviv. It went on tour in Israel, Palestine, and then in Europe and North America. And in fact, what I found most interesting is that you can tell a lot about a people based on what kind of questions they ask. And the different people ask very different questions. What amazed me is that, you know, it took me 6 years to make this film with no money and no experience. I learned how to use a camera shooting these movies, as you could probably tell. And by the time I finished it, for those of you who make movies, you know that making movies is a series of long heartbreaks. By the time I finished it, I was sure it's never going to be seen by anyone. And then something amazing happened, which towards the end of making the film, the right-wing government proposed the Nakba law, and all of a sudden everybody was talking about 48, and the film became very important. And so what happened was that 2 weeks before the premiere at the Cinematheque, which is the biggest theater we have in Israel for documentaries, I got interviewed by the full spectrum of Israeli media. And what was amazing to me is that the far right actually did the best job journalistically. So with the exception of Channel 7 and Channel 9, which are far right television stations, Channel 7 is the Settlers television and news source, and Channel 9 is the Russian borderline fascistic news source. The rest of them are what Ronnie calls liberal Zionists, so people who believe in gay rights but ethnic cleansing Palestine. And so their questions were like, no, but we just need to live together, and no, if they acknowledge our story, we'll acknowledge their story. But the far right was very honest. They said, yes, we've ethnically cleansed them. I think we need to stop pretending that we haven't. And now what? And I got asked a lot of questions about practical return. And in fact, they allowed me to bring to the Israeli far right some of the dozens of really, really interesting and really creative projects that are currently underway about how to do practical return. So instead of debating whether the Palestinians have a right to return, which we don't have a right to debate because of course they do, actually trying to come up with ways that they can practically return to that land. So that launched the film, and if you want to know more about it, I encourage you to go to narrativeproductions.com, which is the website of the film, NARETIV Productions, and it will be screened in Stavanger, however you say it, Stavanger, Tromsø, and Bergen in the next 2 weeks.
First of all, like when you say that the film is giving you an impression of peace between both sides, that's exactly the point where I do not agree with it. Okay? Because, as I said, you cannot expect a woman to shake hands with her rapist. We need justice, and then we can talk about peace. Second of all, when you talk about schools are working regularly in Gaza, the school year started 3 months after the usual time. Second of all, not 96% of the students are going to schools because there are around 40 schools that were totally destroyed, and there are schools that are containing right now homeless people who have their homes destroyed. When you're talking about Gaza City is not destroyed, you said, but the parts of it and the border side are destroyed. That's exactly what you said. Bet Hanun is a city that contains 100,000 people. Not one single house is still standing. Sijaiya is a city that is full of people. It contains a refugee camp. Not a single house standing. Khuza'a is totally destroyed. Rafah is totally destroyed. It's only like the center of Gaza City that is not totally destroyed, but there are like wreckage everywhere. Destroyed homes here and there and there and there, like as if they were like choosing houses. So that was not a valid point. First, when you're talking about like the Israeli had an economical effect on the Palestinians, and that's it. That's not it. It had a social effect. It had a psychological effect. There are 400,000 children who are in urgent need for psychological help, doctors. It had an effect on education. Students could not go to school for 3 months in the beginning of the year, and right now even like the high school students, they don't have enough schools to put the exam centers for them. So it's like, your points, I'm sorry for that, but your points are totally unvalid. It looks like that you've been reading some Norwegian media site where it just tells you the ideas of what's going on and the Israelis saying. The reality is totally different from what you're talking about. I'm sorry for this.
Just one small comment. I was working with UNICEF. We have all the numbers, and well, I think maybe the truth is somewhere between, but I don't want to go into the details. But I was in Beit and in Rafah, and so, but we will not start a discussion about that.
When were you there?
I came home. I returned in end of December.
Okay.
So I was there, and the school they started in the middle of December, 1 month after. That I know 100% sure. Yeah, no, we will not go into the details, but I think the truth maybe is somewhere in between. But the schools, they started in September. In the middle of September, there were three weeks too late.
I think we really shouldn't go into the details. And let's have a few last questions and then some. Yeah. Last question and then some, and then we can speak.
Oh, I will fight for this microphone. First to you. You use the school. I got this before you. You use the school to say Gaza City is working well, and you forget about the kids' trauma. We have kids here traumatized. They still go to school. That does not mean that Gaza City is working well. I'm shaking because I'm so impressed. Lia, you brought a question up about how to fight Zionism. So I am pulling that question back to you. How do you think you will, and we will fight Zionism?
Can we have another question and summarize?
My name is Hege Anette Ramsson, and I'm an activist and a freelance writer. My impression of the film is that its most important mission is to reveal the truth, to crush the myths. Okay, how to build peace, that's another question. But I think it's a step ahead of that journey, how to build peace. And the most important, and one of the important things that has to be done is to reveal the truth, to have the Israelis to acknowledge how their state was created. And your contribution is very big and great on that level.
Thank you. Now maybe we can answer and summarize at the same time, maybe? If it works?
I think that this lady here said it really well. I think that there's two different works that need to happen. I think that the work that needs to happen amongst Israeli society is the main responsibility of Israeli anti-Zionists. We need to tackle our society and the mythology in our society largely through information and through creative and direct action, hopefully non-violent. And of course there's the work that needs to happen outside of Israel, which, as of all of the options that are on the table, I think the most viable is the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, which is has the highest chance of succeeding, and is also nonviolent, which is a principle I hold dearly. But I personally, and maybe this is, I guess, the main thing to say here, is that maybe this is where we part ways, me and the guys, is that I haven't given up on my society. I have a lot of faith in it because I've seen such horrific societies as the Soviet Union and Germany transform. And certainly, Stalin killed 50 million people. I think it's possible. I think it's likely, and I think it's going to happen. I think that when the occupation ends, all the Israelis will say, oh, I was always against the occupation, but I didn't say anything, because no. I think our job is to get our society there. And I think that your job is to put as much pressure in whatever way you can on your government to basically end the normalization with the State of Israel and stop buying weapons from the State of Israel. And there's individuals, on the table.
Or selling weapons.
Norway is selling.
Per capita, Norway is the largest weapons.
Okay, there's people on this table who are actively working towards the boycott and divestment and sanctions movement. They I'm sure can answer questions about what in Norway you can specifically do.
I'll try to make it short. I agree with everything that has been said. Sorry?
5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay. I agree with everything that has been said in past comments. I think that two things need to take place. One is in the short term, the other in the long term. In the short term, we have to end the crimes. Not today, yesterday. Israel is practicing an endless list of violations of international law and human rights and so on. These have to end immediately. We should not give an ounce of legitimacy to what Israel is doing on a daily basis, on a systematic basis, as a matter of policy. The main way to tackle that is with the BDS campaign, which has, in the past decade, it had become a global awareness movement, a rights-based movement that demands the three fundamental rights of the Palestinians, both the end of the occupation of 1967, the harsh, brutal military occupation, both equality inside what is regarded as Israel proper, Palestine 48, and most importantly, the right of refugees, which are the majority, 70% of all Palestinians, the right to return home. All these are protected by international law and human rights conventions. This movement has managed to transform, to turn around the whole discourse about Israel-Palestine, and this brings me a lot of optimism. I see what is happening in the past decade, and it counters everything that happened before that. Israel was doing everything with full impunity. It can no longer do that. Today I saw in the newspaper that the former head of the CIA said that the BDS campaign is a strategic threat and it is a global intifada, which is great. Let's support that. And it's also more violent. Secondly, in the long term, we have to do a lot of work to educate people, and the most difficult would be to educate and to change the minds of Israelis, and the most difficult would be to change the minds of the liberal Zionists. Because the right wing, they're honest about their racism, like Lia mentioned. The liberal Zionists, they lie to themselves every moment of every day. They are delusional. Anyone speaking about an Israeli left, anyone speaking about the peace camp in Israel or an Israeli left, is either delusional or lying. There is no Israeli left, never was, ever. Not a single one. There were anti-Zionists. There are a handful of anti-Zionists, dissidents. They will not define themselves as Israeli left because they are not Zionists. They are dissidents because, like ourselves, who are opposed to everything that Israel represents. So, in the long term, to change the minds of people, I think that the main thing that we can do is actually support the one-state discourse. The BDS campaign that I mentioned a moment ago doesn't take a position about 1 state, 2 states, 5 states, because it's not about that. The BDS campaign talks about the rights. It is a rights-based approach, not a solution-based approach. In the long run, we have to see how to implement these rights in the best possible way, preferably better than the way it was implemented in South Africa, post-apartheid. that is a long process that is awaiting, and we have to start that, and this is a wonderful opportunity to do that. And I'm optimistic about it, after all.
I just want to say a huge thank you to the organizers of this event and to Angel for having coordinated a massive amount of information to bring us all here.
Jumping in.
So thank you very much. I am now. You didn't want to speak, or
No.
You didn't want to speak.
Thank you very much for having us.
So there is one. As we go off the stage, I ask Kai to put a short video, which is a poem read by Muhammad Ali, which is called Revenge. And I beg you all to watch it until the end and don't go away in the middle. I'm kind of curious what Mohammed would think about it later, but I'll have to just hear it in private. And after that, we'll have a short break, and then we'll have some storytelling and dance and a lot of fun. So thank you for being with us.
It's a great pleasure to welcome back to the festival stage Taha Muhammad Ali, who was born in 1931 in a Galilee village from which he had to flee with his family during the 1948 war that was the beginning of Israel. A year later, he returned and settled in Nazareth, and he has lived there ever since. He runs a little shop selling religious totems to pilgrims who come to Nazareth. He's survived in I was going to say a wily way, but it's the way of the world. He's survived as people survive, understanding what's available and what to do. Along the way, he's become a powerful storyteller and a deeply moving poet. Taha Muhammad Ali, repeater poet.
We'll read just one poem. Taha will read it first in Arabic, and I'll read the translation in English. The poem is called Revenge.
انتقام. أحيانا أتمنى أن أبارز الشخص الذي قتل والدي، هدم بيتا، شردني في بلاد الله الضيقة، فإذا قتلني أكون قد ارتحت، وإن أجهزت عليه أكون قد انتقمت. لكن إذا تبين لي أثناء المبارزة أن لغريمي أما تنتظره أو أبا يضع كف يمينه على صدره كلما تأخر ابنه ولو ربع ساعة عن موعد عودته، فأنا عندها لن أقتله إذا تمكنت منه. كذلك أنا لن أفتك به إذا ظهر لي أن له إخوة وأخوات يحبونه يديمون تشوقهم إليه، أو إذا كان له زوجة ترحب به، أطفال لا يطيقون ذهابه ويفرحون بهداياه، أو إذا كان له أصدقاء أقارب جيران معارف زملاء سجن رفقاء مستشفى أو خدماء مدرسة يسألون عنه ويحثون عليه. أما إذا كان وحيدا مقطوعا من شجرة لا أب له ولا أم، لا أخوة ولا أخوات، لا زوج ولا أطفال، بدون أصدقاء ولا أقرباء ولا جيران، بلا زملاء أو رفقاء أو أخدان، فأنا لن أضيف إلى شقاء وحدته لا عذاب موت ولا أسى فناء، بل سأكتفي بأن أغض الطرف عنه حين أمر به في الطريق، مقنعا نفسي بأن الإهمال بحد ذاته هو أيضا نوع من أنواع الانتقام. وشكرا.
Revenge. At times I wish I could meet in a duel the man who killed my father and raised our home, expelling me into a narrow country. And if he killed me, I'd rest at last. And if I were ready, I would take my revenge. But if it came to light when my rival appeared, that he had a mother waiting for him, or a father who put his right hand over the heart's place in his chest, whenever his son was late by even just a quarter of an hour for a meeting they'd set, then I would not kill him, even if I could. Likewise, I would not murder him if it were soon made clear that he had a brother or sisters who loved him and constantly longed to see him, or if he had a wife to greet him and children who couldn't bear his absence and whom his presence thrilled, or if he had friends or companions, neighbors he knew or allies from prison or hospital room, or classmates from his school, asking about him and sending him regards. But if he turned out to be on his own, cut off like a branch from a tree, without a mother or father, with neither a brother nor sister, wifeless without a child, and without kin or neighbors or friends, colleagues or companions, then I'd add not a thing to his pain within that aloneness, not the torment of death, and not the sorrow of passing away. Instead, I'd be content to ignore him when I passed him by on the street, as I convinced myself that paying him no attention in itself was a kind of revenge.
We will now have a 10-minute break, and I still urge you to go up and look at it. But afterwards, we're going upstairs.